Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
We're back with more changes at DoD, and this time an update on COVID-19 and reinstatement. We all know that the previous administration issued unlawful orders on mandatory vaccines on an experimental vaccine, COVID-19. You know it, we know it. We're doing everything we can, as quickly as we can, to reinstate those who are affected by that policy. It hasn't been perfect, and we know that. We're having an ongoing conversation with you to get it right, working with the White House as well. We want anyone impacted by that vaccine mandate back into the military, people of conscience, warriors of conscience, back in our formations. We hear you, and we're working to get updated guidance as quickly as possible. So kind of here's where we are on more guidance we're providing right now. So in January, the president issued his executive order. We jumped right on it. In February, I directed the department to take corrective action regarding this specific department's unfair, overbroad, unnecessary COVID vaccine mandate. You know, we apologize then, apologize now for how it was done, and we want to fix it. So today, I'm signing a memorandum that directs the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness to provide additional guidance to the boards that are reviewing these cases concerning the review of requests from service members and former service members adversely impacted by COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The guidance also will facilitate the removal of adverse actions on service members solely for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine, including discharge upgrades and less than fully honorable discharges for individuals separated for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. So we're trying to scrub all that, clean all that up. We'll also facilitate appropriate remedies for service members who have suffered additional career setbacks resulting from the previous administration's unlawful vaccine mandate. So that original EO addresses the unfair, since rescinded COVID-19 vaccine mandate imposed on warfighters during the previous administration. We know how bad it was. You know how bad it was. And through this guidance, which I encourage you to check it all out directly, because it's an update going even further than what we've done in the past, this memo is providing supplemental remedies for service members and veterans negatively impacted by the DoD defunct COVID-19 disease vaccine mandate. So more guidance here that we think is really important in getting this right, and we welcome you all back as quickly as possible.
Welcome back to More War Monday here on the Rob Maness Show. And we're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, fighting the Pentagon's internal war continues, folks. I didn't really think we would need to do another show about this subject because of what you just saw from Secretary Hegseth right there. Obviously, President Trump and he have both issued an order to reinstate those forced out and harmed by the unlawful COVID vaccine order. But we still have major issues. Very few members have been reinstated because of the bureaucratic processes being used and the hidden resistors that are still in the government. That leads me to why we're doing a show today. The timing is critical. The fight for justice for all of those military members and families continues to meet this resistance and undermining from inside the Pentagon. My guest today is involved in that and has become a victim of such actions, even though he got a favorable outcome from the Air Force Board of Military Records Corrections. But that wasn't enough to get past the resistors, and he faces forced retirement in just a few days. Brigadier General Chris Sage serves as Special Assistant to the Commander for Joint Air Power, Space, and Multi-Domain Operations, the NATO Air Command, and is originally from Newport News, Virginia. He was commissioned in 1994 as a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy. He's commanded multiple times the 389th Fighter Squadron, the 389th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron, the 366th Operations Group at Mountain Home, Idaho, the Gunfighters, the 4th Fighter Wing, the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing. The general's assignments are a mix of joint operational and training tours, culminating in 4,600 flight hours, and as an operational F-15E fighter pilot, he has over 1,200 combat hours and participated in Operations Northern Watch, Deliberate Forge, Allied Force, Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and Inherent Resolve. And I'm sure there's more to that list. And he joins us today. Unfortunately, his attorney, Davis Younts, could not be here, but we've had Davis on before with other clients, and he's been very successful at getting that job done. But I got to read this disclaimer. Neither General Sage or me speaks for the Department of War. Our opinions are our own. They do not represent any Department of War or Department of the Air Force position. General Sage, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
A lot.
Well, if I get the button, I got to get the button right. There it is. Ha! Are you with me, Chris?
I'm with you, Rob. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for that disclaimer. My comments today, as you mentioned, are my own and do not represent the Department of War. And to your point, I just want to say thank you for bringing this issue once again to the forefront so your audience can hear the truth about what's still going on by the obstructionists that are still hidden inside the Pentagon.
Yeah. First, before we dive into the technical detail of this, Chris, what's the current status? Has anything changed in the last week or so?
Then not, Rob. But since we won at the Board of Correction for Military Records in mid-November, early November, it was then quickly overturned within days, which is just shocking after the board spent 2 months researching all the evidence, looking at all the interviews, looking at the situation in the deployed environment. There's been no change. We've attempted to appeal. We've attempted to get an extension on my forced retirement past 31 December, and there's been crickets and silence, unfortunately, from the Air Force and the Department of War.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. You know, what's really strange in your case is that you took the shot. You followed that order, right?
I did take the shot early on before I fully understood it. The rest of my family, thankfully, did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself in a situation in a deployed setting where COVID was the major backdrop. It was behind every decision we made. It was actually the peak of COVID in the Middle East during the time that I was there when this investigation happened, and the board found, appropriately so, that my actions and my opinions related to COVID is what influenced the outcome of this investigation and the adverse actions that were taken against me, and provided me relief until it was overturned by the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force.
So what happened that led you from? I mean, I read a little bit of your resume, but I mean, you're a combat experience, commanded at all the right levels, which means you did a good job at each level and continued to progress on to be a wing commander twice, both at home here and in combat. So what were the things that got you to where you are being forced to retire and had to go through the Air Force BCMR process?
Well, thanks, Rob. As you know, in your command experience as well, that you don't always have 100% of the people on board, but the goal is to get as many as possible. And the research shows if you can get about 75% of the people on board, then you can accomplish the mission, and you have that momentum you need to get things across the finish line. So in a case of a combat wing, that very high ops tempo, underneath COVID, also we were heavily involved in the withdrawal from Afghanistan. We were engaging the enemy, dropping bombs on ISIS in Iraq and Syria. We were training the Jordanians. We were training with the French. We were participating in Bright Star in Egypt. And we were the lead wing to help bring the Israelis into CENTCOM and AFCENT. So beyond all of this, we're dealing with COVID. And it's normal that sometimes people will attack your leadership. And in this case, it was an individual in my wing that basically filed a IG complaint against me. I didn't think much of it because we knew we had acted with integrity, and we had followed the law, and we had followed the regulations and the intent of my commander. All 7 of these allegations, Rob, to include hostile work environment and about 6 allegations tied to fraud, waste, and abuse, they were all thrown out. However, the investigator then took comments from a very small cohort of disgruntled officers and created a brand new investigation against me. Once again, under the backdrop of COVID. COVID was a very big part of the investigation and the report. And this investigator who investigated me and the wing from his air-conditioned office in the Pentagon never visited the base, never knew what the environment was like, never talked to any of the 29 witnesses that I recommended, except 4 that he had previously talked to. So he basically violated the statute by not investigating my witnesses. He never visited the base. It was just a sham. And before I pause, the reason I can tell you it was a sham was because my command chain at the time did not fire me. They encouraged me to keep doing good work. They visited numerous times, realized that there was no smoke, no fire, left me in command, gave me a medal at the end of my tour, my deployed tour, said great things about me, pushed me for promotion. And then when I returned back to NATO headquarters, my new chain of command, my U.S. chain of command, looked at all the evidence and decided to take no action against me, which is why when the board eventually overturned this investigation, it made sense. But what is shocking is that the new Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for basically personnel, manpower, and reserve affairs overturned the board's results. And when you look at the letter, Rob, you'll see that he had only been in the job for a few weeks. It was the lawyers that wrote the letter that for some reason had been fighting my case for 4 years, were just opposed to me continuing on and taking a win in this manner.
Yeah, and I don't think you mentioned it, but that promotion recommendation that you had coming out of this command tour that was in question resulted in you being selected for your second star, didn't it?
So, no, Rob, that's a great point. Actually, I'd been put in for a 2-star before I even deployed, and I was selected while I was deployed for 2-star promotion. My downrange command and then my follow-on command continued to support that effort, and I was promoted. Later, when we found out that the last administration, the Secretary of the Air Force, Kendall, Lloyd Austin as the Secretary of Defense, recommended to the President of the United States that I get stripped off that promotion list. And it was done with the auto pen. So I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a minute. But then my chain of command actually tried to get me promoted again, get me put back on the promotion list. So my chain of command all the way through this, from before, during, and then after, I've been very supportive. This has been political since day one. And the shocking part is you would think the new administration would follow the guidance of the video that you showed at the beginning of this podcast, that it's time to fix the rights, the injustices of the past, and take corrective action. But they continue to not take the victory that was handed to them by the Board of Corrections.
Yeah, it's baffling to me, Chris. I mean, your situation at face value, I've been working with those that have been forcibly kicked out a lot. But so at face value, it seems unique. But there are a lot of people in your exact position that weren't forced out from a bad conduct discharge or poor performance or those kind of things, but were just made to go, okay, you're going to have to retire because you didn't get promoted or whatever the trigger was. They were forced to retire. Well, we got to take a real quick commercial break. It won't last very long, and we'll come back. We'll see a little clip from Andy Biggs, very short clip, talking about what's going on in the government, because you're right. There's a lot of resistance still going on. We'll be right back with General Chris Sage.
Your heart beats 100,000 times a day. What are you giving it to keep up? Coffee, energy drinks, or the science-backed power of Cardio Miracle? Packed with L-arginine, L-citrulline, and CoQ10, it helps your body naturally boost nitric oxide levels so your heart, energy, and endurance stay strong. Your body deserves the best. Tap the link below and give it Cardio Miracle.
There's so many people in the executive branch that support President Trump, but you have these secondary and tertiary level people that are trying to put up every kind of speed stick to try to wait out President Trump's term. That's a real problem, and that's why I believe that our top tier leaders need to clean out everybody underneath them and start over again.
Welcome back to More War Run Monday. My guest is Air Force Brigadier General Chris Sage. And Chris, Andy was just talking at AmFest out in Phoenix during that clip, I believe. So this is all something that's very disappointing, but not unexpected by those of us that have worked in government for over 30 years, where you get the political appointees in, and then if the folks that are in rung 2, 3, 4, and 5 below them are not on board, they can really put a monkey wrench in the gears of justice.
Rob, you're exactly right. We see this over the last 4 years throughout my case. It's embedded obstructionists that operate either in the JAG circles or the general counsel circles that are advising these senior leaders. And in my case, the gentleman that overturned the board results, a guy named Rich Anderson, a political appointee. I hear he's a great guy, but the board looked at my case for 1.5 to 2 months. And then within 6 days on the calendar, 4 business days, Mr. Anderson overturned my case. When you read his letter, it's written in unbelievable amount of legalese. It's obviously written by the lawyers, and it's the same lawyers that have been fighting us the whole way through for the last 4 years. And in the case of my case, there's an individual named Shannon McGuire, who was the one dealing with my case for the last 3 years. And sure enough, she's now the acting general counsel, the one that's advising Mr. Anderson, that's advising the Secretary of the Air Force. And so she was also there under the last administration. So she is one of these individuals that Congressman Biggs is talking about. There are many of them that are still there that are basically, they either slow roll the administration or they directly oppose the administration. But when I listen to what Secretary Hegseth said in your opening clip, compare that to what we see in this situation, it just does not make any sense at all. And the argument would be, well, there's not enough evidence to tie this to COVID. That's why he overturned it. Even though the board, by the way, the boards are set up on purpose so that you'd never have a tie. So in my case, the board was 2-1 majority, found the preponderance of the evidence that there was enough evidence related to COVID that my views on COVID negatively affected, the IG investigation. So why would someone that looked at this for a few hours or a few days, relying on their attorneys, then overturn it like that? That violates the intent of Secretary Hegseth's speech that we just watched, and it violates the 7 May 2025 memo that Mr. Tata's office put out to basically fix the injustices of the past.
Yeah. So that was the excuse Anderson had on his letter, is that it's not tied to COVID.
Correct. The board found with all the evidence that it was tied to COVID. Because the reality is, Rob, a few quick examples. When I first showed up, our airmen there was probably 10 to 12 airmen that were sick with COVID, and they weren't feeling very well. So they put them in an isolation tent, which is, was bizarre to begin with. But when I asked to go see them a couple days into my command, first of all, I was met with resistance. Then I was told I had to mask up. I had to put on all this protective gear. I had to put gloves on. I had to put a shield on. I didn't put the shield on, but I'm going in the tent. When I got in the tent, I took the gloves off and I shook their hand. The medical experts, were about to flip out that I did that. And I looked at them and said, look, it's just a virus. I'll just wash my hands afterward. It's no big deal. But the crazy thing, Rob, is there was barbed wire around the isolation tent. When I asked why, they said, well, it's to keep It's to keep them in the tent area, and it's to keep everybody else out. And I immediately ordered, we're tearing down the barbed wire. These airmen are sick patients. They're not prisoners. So that's just one of the many examples of the actions I took that really infuriated those that worshiped the COVID mandate, which unfortunately some of these people working under me fell into that category.
Let me get this straight. They put a tent up to isolate these people and then put barbed wire around it. Was it guarded too to keep them in?
It wasn't guarded, but there were signs up that said "Do not enter." There was barbed wire. You had to have, you had the code to get in, and this infuriated Congressman Eli Crane and 10 other congressmen. They actually put a photo of this on a letter that they sent to the Secretary of War and to the Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness as one of the many examples of the ridiculousness of the allegations that were made against me. Another quick example is a recommendation came down that our airmen had to wear masks indoors and outdoors. Well, I basically signed a memo that said, our airmen, you know what it's like to be on a flight line in the 100-degree. I said, our airmen are not wearing masks underneath jets in the 100-degree heat in the Middle East in the summer. I go, that's ridiculous. It's a FOD hazard for the engines. So that, that along with, they implemented a testing center for airmen that were flying in with 800 airmen swapping out. They implemented a testing center on the in-processing line. When I found out about that, I said, hey, these airmen were tested before they left. They're going to be tested in due time when they get here. We had the lowest COVID rates in all of the Middle East at any Middle East base. I'm like, we don't need to do this test. And that made the report that I did not trust my medical professionals because I made a command decision that made sense for the airmen, it made sense for the mission, and it was common sense. The three principles that I guided every decision by.
Yeah, absolutely. I read some of the stuff about the masks out on the flight line underneath the aircraft. I know I've been a commander in the Middle East doing that exact same thing with my maintenance guys working on B-1s. And I would have done the same thing that you did. I would have said, no, that makes no sense whatsoever. Nothing's going to live in the fuel and fumes in the heat of that anyway. But this whole tent with the barbed wire, that is just unbelievable. But it paints the picture of the craziness of the moves that were happening with COVID, not just in the military, but even outside the military. I mean, I saw a pastor arrested because he had a church service twice, was arrested twice for it, and thankfully kept going, kept doing it too. They eventually lost their case, but so Anderson is the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Manpower and Readiness, who does all the personnel stuff. So that's the office in each of the services that is in charge of this reinstatement, was in charge of implementing COVID policy, really. But he is a Trump appointee, correct?
That is correct. And I hear good things about him based on his background. I hear he's a patriot. He's a retired officer. Which is why this just points back to the Biggs comment and to the Sec Wars comments that it is literally people that are obstructing the process. First, they obstruct you through the whole process, through the appeal process. Then when you eventually make it to the board and win, then they overturn it. Then when your lawyer inquires, well, why did you do that? The answer back is, well, it's bigger than just COVID. There's underlying problems with the investigation, which brings us back to the last administration and the persecution that happened under the last administration. So it's a circular firing squad that just cannot seem to take the win. To your point, Rob, I was looking at some facts the other day that over 8,000 people that were forcibly removed from the military because of COVID-related issues, another 70 to 80,000 that left voluntarily. But how many of those 8,000 have been reinstated? I just read the other day that it's less than 100. And if that number is accurate after 1 year, then there's an issue here. And I'd like to just make that point. This is so much bigger than me. I am the canary in the coal mine. If I get forced retired in 2 days, I'll be fine. In fact, people ask me, why did you fight for 4 years? Well, thankfully, we had the means to do it. We had the resources to do it. And frankly, we felt called to do it. My wife and my family, the 5 children, we've been married for almost 29 years. My wife is a veteran, by the way, and she's an turned attorney. And we decided that we're going to fight and we're going to stand up for what's right. We're going to fight the injustice. We continue to do that. So I'll be fine. What I worry about is those 8,000 or 80,000 war fighters that now are looking at my case. I'm one of the first that went through the Air Force Board of Correction for Military Records. They're emailing me, they're texting me, they're DMing me saying, sir, what hope do I have if you can't win? By the way, over $100,000 spent in lost back pay combined with my legal bills. These young airmen, these staff sergeants, tech sergeants, young captains and majors, they don't have those resources. And they're looking at this and they're worried, and they should be.
Yeah, they should be worried. Matter of fact, all Americans should be worried, Chris, because if a case that's so clear can't be rectified, that is, it doesn't matter whether you're a general or an airman basic. This case is very clear what happened, and you mentioned the auto pin earlier, and Kendall and I assume the former chief of staff recommending you be redlined. We call that redlining if you're on a promotion list and you're taken off the list by the president, folks. But the president, you don't think, really made the decision?
Well, Rob, we know that he did not. Well, I don't know for sure. What I can tell you is that it was not him that signed the letter. It was the auto pen. There were 3 auto pens used, A, B, and C. Senator Cruz's office pointed this out. So did some other organizations. And mine was auto pen B, used during the time period. An exact match. My lawyers have verified this. So the reality is he was most likely not aware. And the reason why this is significant is because on November the 28th and again on December 2nd, the current president of the United States, the current commander-in-chief, basically nullified and voided all official legal actions that were taken by the last president. That includes the memo that stripped me off the promotion list. And you're correct. The correct term is redlining. I will give my military chain of command credit. They actually had nothing to do with this. They were supporting me. This was purely an act within the Secretary of the Air Force's office, pushed up to the Secretary of Defense's office, pushed up to the White House. Who was advising the Secretary of the Air Force at the time under the last administration? The same exact person that is advising the Secretary of the Air Force today. She opposed my case at every appeal. She opposed it when we took our fight to the Secretary of the Air Force with a letter when we heard he was going to try to strip me off the list. And she is now the primary legal advisor to the Secretary of the Air Force and to Mr. Anderson, who signed the memo.
Wow. So what's her name again?
Shannon McGuire.
Shannon McGuire. That's unfortunate because, Terry Aderam, who was the DOD at the time, general counsel, is the one that modified or put the letter out, say, with the fake info about, the EUA vaccine is the same as the Comirnaty vaccine from a legal perspective, which is entirely not true. That's issue 1 with that order and why it's unlawful. It was unlawful. And 2, the Comirnaty was never made available. It never really FDA approved it, taken off the EUA list, the emergency use authorization list. And you can't force American human beings to take an experimental vaccine, even if they're in uniform, right?
That is 100% correct. I actually had lots of airmen come up to me while deployed. It's just some did arrive, normally from the Guard. They were, for whatever reason, were unable to get the shot. And they asked me my personal opinion. Well, by this point, lots of friends of mine, doctors back in the U.S., and were sending me articles. They were sending me peer-reviewed articles, the studies that were coming out. And so these young airmen, specifically young females, they're like, sir, I want to have a family one day, and I'm very concerned about what I'm hearing. And I said, you should be concerned because here's a peer-reviewed study that says, this has not been studied with pregnant women, young men with the heart issues. I mean, we now know much better, but even at the time, these studies were coming out. So I would then question my medical professionals. What do you think about this? What about this study? Or should we be concerned? This study tells me right here that masks don't work. Specifically, the Chinese masks the chemically infused Chinese masks, they do not work. And I had one of the commanders that spoke out against me in the report came up to me after and said, "Sir, you have to stop asking questions about COVID." And I'm like, "Why?" I said, we're going to make common sense decisions. "Sir, when you ask questions, you're getting political." And when that happened, I realized that for me, it was common sense and it was just being a good commander.
Yeah.
For that individual, it was a religion. And I was questioning his religion.
Yeah, I want to dive into that after this commercial break real quick, Chris, because I think that's important for folks to understand that weren't on the scene exactly how this transpired, because what you just said there, most people have never heard it before from an active duty Air Force officer or any military officer, quite frankly. It can be quite confusing. We'll be right back with General Chris Sage on the Rob Maness Show.
Tired of feeling tired? Your energy isn't just about caffeine, it's about circulation. Cardio Miracle supercharges your nitric oxide levels to help your blood flow better, your heart beat stronger, and your body feel more alive. No crashes, no jitters, just real, lasting energy from the inside out. Feel the difference. Tap the link below to try Cardio Miracle today.
They devastated our military in many ways. One, in terms of morale, there were many service members who were aware of this legal issue, who knew that this was an unlawful order and understand that it's our obligation as service members. These are the lessons of My Lai. These are the lessons of Nuremberg, that you don't follow unlawful orders. You have an affirmative duty not to follow unlawful orders. And service members who tried to uphold their oaths and do that lost their livelihoods, lost their careers. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention that many suffered vaccine injuries. And we have whistleblowers who brought forward data showing huge increases in things like neurological issues, things like heart issues, immediately following the vaccine mandate. And all of this was swept under the rug. So there's been a huge devastation to the force when we talk about wanting to increase the lethality of our force. This is an ongoing issue that the administration should certainly look into.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. My guest today is active duty Air Force Brigadier General Chris Sage, who is about to be forced to retire here in just a few days on December 31st because the resistors in the government, the obstructionists in the government, regardless of whether a Trump appointee is in place or not, are being successful in obstructing the President of the United States and the Secretary of War's direct order to not only reinstate those 8,000 plus individuals that were forced to leave the service, but also alleviate the harm that's been caused. And I think that's by other military members. And Chris, I think that is one of the things that the legalese people in the Secretary of the Air Force's office, with Ms. McGuire leading it, the acting general counsel, is leaving out of the picture when they write it down, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the reality is, in my case specifically, they had to divorce me from COVID because they knew that we had won on COVID. And even though the board found a preponderance of the evidence, they knew they had to divorce it. But the reality is, even if they didn't divorce it, they continue to stymie, this case, other cases. But in my specific case, they had to divorce it from COVID. Then they could point back to a botched investigation that happened 3.5 years ago under the last administration. And the reason we know it was botched was for a few reasons. Number one, my commander at the time, who now is the NORTHCOM commander, he knew that I was under investigation. He then increased, rightfully so, the number of times he visited my base. He visited 5 or 6 times after the investigation started. He sent numerous people, greater than 10, like 12 people total, to go visit my base and report back to him. His 2-star, his 1-star, all of his colonels, his chief master sergeant, his command master sergeant, they all reported back, "Sir, we see no smoke, we see no fire." He did not remove me from command, which showed that he had faith in my command. And like I said, he treated me very well out the door with a medal and good words of my change of command. My next chain of command took no action against me and were very strong about the reason why, because they thought my actions were appropriate. Fast forward to the BCMR. We won at the BCMR, which was a big win. We celebrated for about 5 minutes. until we read the next memo that then said that the results were overturned. By the way, did anyone from the Secretary's office call me? Oh, no. That showed up in an email, in a nondescript email that showed that I won at the BCMR, followed by another memo that said it had been overturned. And then there's two more victories. The fourth victory is when the president nullified and voided all legal actions signed by the autopen. The fifth one, which the Secretary of the Air Force or the Department of War will not acknowledge, is the fact that when I was told I'm going to be forced retired, my 5-year statutory limitation is up because it moved my time frame back to the left because I went from the 2-star list back to the 1-star list. They did what's called an OGD, an officer grade determination, to determine whether I'd served honorably. I wasn't holding my breath on that one, which means they could have retired me as a colonel. Right. Well, it turned out this board found that my actions during the entirety of my 1-star tenure, to include during the investigation, were honorable. I acted with integrity at the level of performance and integrity required at the 1-star level. Basically, I served honorable as a 1-star, which is even more evidence that they discounted the IG case against me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, what's really disappointing to me is, because I know some of these folks that are in political appointed jobs and just correct me if I don't have this right, but you have not had a phone call from any political appointee in the Air Force in this process.
Not a single one. And the way the system works is they don't include your chain of command. So my chain of command, very supportive. I keep them in the loop, which I find kind of humorous. So I keep them in the loop, and I just get communicated to via email for the most part. I did have a really good Air Force defense attorney. The first one retired. The second one PCS'd. And by the way, the Air Force doesn't provide these people to you. You have to go find them. I had to search and make numerous phone calls. Thankfully, I had some mentors, 4-star, 3-star mentors that connected me with an office that then said, well, we can loan this defense attorney to you part-time. So I went through 2 of those, and then I basically was on my own for a year with my old JAG. She's retired. She was very helpful, kind of pro bono. Then I finally hired Davis Younts once I realized I'm being outgunned here. Once I saw that they were able to overturn the BCMR results in the number of days, using their legalese gymnastics, I then hired Davis Younts, and now we've gone on the offensive to try to get the word out. And like I said, I can afford to pay Davis Younts. I'm very blessed after 31 years. I really worry for those young airmen that don't have the means and the resources.
I share your worry, my friend. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on, because you're not just speaking for you, you're speaking for thousands and thousands of, in the Air Force's case, airmen that were unceremoniously, unfairly treated, unceremoniously either got the boot or had to leave because they knew they were going to have legal issues and those kinds of things. And it's just heartbreaking because most of those young folks, they have $0, and unless somebody will take them pro bono, and I know attorneys are doing that, but it's tough to get them linked up with them in a timely manner. We got some questions from the audience, from the live audience. Let's go ahead and take one. Go ahead, Shell. That's a great question, Liz.
And Rob, if you'd like me to answer that, I think this is where Congressman Biggs, I mean, he hits it right in the bullseye. It's a great effort over the last year to put quality people in these positions, but the reality is there's second and third tier level obstructionists that continue to operate behind the scenes. They call it, malicious compliance is one way. It basically means they slow roll it. They're effectively waiting out the president of the United States, which is hard to believe. But after 1 year, they realized that they just got to make it 3 more. Well, less than 100 people were reinstated in the last year. So, from their perspective, from some of these obstructionists, they're winning. They're sort of meeting their objective to obstruct the president of the United States, the commander in chief, and to slow roll what the Secretary of War so eloquently said in your show opening. I mean, this is an injustice that has to be happened. The Secretary of War admitted, both in writing and in person there, that this was wrong, that it was illegal. In his document, he talked about an illegal mandate. We all know that, especially those of us that weren't smart to it at first. We quickly realized, which is why I started asking questions and continued to ask questions. But Rob, let me, speaking of why are these people still around? The investigator that investigated me is still around. When you look at the Marxist-infused IG report that he wrote, where he was pitting the oppressed versus the oppressor. Here's one example. I worked for a Marine 3-star at NATO, an American Marine, before I deployed. He operated under what was called an email policy. So he had a very clear email policy for good order and discipline. If you receive an email from me, here's the way I'd like you to deal with it. Put information or action. Don't add other people to a private email. Just think of it like a private letter. He put out this guidance. He put this all in a memo. Right before I deployed, he said, Chris, you may want to think about using this. It served me very well. And he served in Desert Storm, by the way. 40-year combat Marine veteran. I took his email policy. I quickly sent it out to my command team and said, I modified it a little bit, made it a little bit Air Force friendly. I sent it out. In the IG complaint, the investigator ranted about how I did not trust my subordinates. And his proof was that I used an email policy that was oppressive and limited communication up and down the chain, which was anything but the truth. But these are the type of allegations that were used against me. Stalin's secret police chief said, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. And that's what this report felt like. They interviewed me for 7 hours, asking the most minute details of situations that I didn't remember. We followed up, and in the report, he said, General Sage really struggled to remember the details. Therefore, that limits his credibility. There's many more examples I could use, but the email one is just the most absurd, not to mention the COVID examples that we've talked about.
Now, is the individual that did this investigation a government civilian, a contractor, a military person?
A government civilian that has never operated in this type of environment that we were operating in, that did the entire investigation from his office, his air-conditioned office in the Pentagon, over the phone. It was, IG investigations are only supposed to take a few weeks to a few months so that they can correct the wrong and help the unit and provide relief. Mine started in January, really December of 21, and went all the way until the end of November of 22. We had all redeployed. The wing, it was a brand new wing. There was no relief given. There was nothing, no conclusions reached, except for the fact that he substantiated an allegation against me that my next chain of command effectively threw out. But once you have that black mark on your record, Rob, you know this, you can't recover. But even though at the time I thought maybe I could, because my command chain immediately said, we're going to try to get you promoted again. And then out of the blue, I get the memo that the Secretary of the Air Force is now, this was first he redlined me, then they tried to get me promoted again, but it's just impossible to do with that black mark on your record.
Yeah, which it makes it even more significant that your grade determination here at the end said, he's good. Retire him as a 1-star general because he served honorably in every position, and in that grade specifically. That's hard to do if you get a black mark on an IG complaint. As a matter of fact, we're all told 06s and above. You know this. The audience doesn't know it, but I'm going to tell you now. We're all told if you have an IG complaint against you, until that's adjudicated and you're vindicated, we won't even let you retire in some cases, and we certainly are going to do a grade determination on you if you ends up being substantiated. We're going to take one more commercial break here real quick, Chris, and when we come back, I want to dive into accountability, especially at the SES, the the senior executive service and the general officer level. Get your views on that, on what's happening based on the situations that you've come in contact with, quite frankly. We'll be right back with General Chris Sage.
Heart disease doesn't wait until you're older. It starts now. The good news? You can take control today. Cardio Miracle is the all-in-one heart health formula designed to support healthy blood pressure, better circulation, and more energy. With over 58 natural ingredients, it's time to fuel your heart the right way. Invest in your health before you have to. Click below to try Cardio Miracle.
Devastated our military. Devastated our military. In many ways. One, in terms of morale, there were many service members who were aware of this legal issue, who knew that this was an unlawful order, and understand that it's our obligation as service members. These are the lessons of My Lai. These are the lessons of Nuremberg, that you don't follow unlawful orders. You have an affirmative duty not to follow unlawful orders. And service members who tried to uphold their oaths and do that lost their livelihoods, lost their careers. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention that many suffered vaccine injuries. And we have whistleblowers who brought forward data showing huge increases in things like neurological issues, things like heart issues, immediately following the vaccine mandate. And all of this was swept under the rug. So there's been a huge devastation to the force when we talk about wanting to increase the lethality of our force. This is an ongoing issue that the administration should certainly look into.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, folks. My guest today is General Chris Sage. General, that was the wrong clip, but that's what happens when you're your own producer, like I am today during this holiday season. But Casey's video is worth seeing again because she doesn't say the word, but it gets to accountability. The loudest message that I keep hearing from the force. No, it doesn't matter what uniform they're wearing, whether it's even in the Coast Guard or the Merchant Marine, is accountability amongst the generals and admirals and the senior executive service. Because I'll just tell you, I know about a situation where a deputy assistant secretary in personnel policy, her position has been changed from a political appointee to a career position, and there are SESs that are protecting the person in that position, and they're a Biden holdover, and we're an Obama appointee before that. Personnel policy. I mean, that position is responsible for recruiting, is responsible for promotion. It has a major say in where men and women that are wearing stars get assigned, what jobs they get, which translates to whether the president's orders are going to be followed or not, his lawful orders are going to be followed adequately or not, or whether they're going to be resisted. And that is a problem that we on the outside are seeing. Now, I don't have any classified information anymore. I have never talked to the individuals in these positions that I remember anyway, but my gut's telling me that when I listen to the troops that are there and that have experienced this and are watching it, that if we don't answer these questions, our readiness is not going to last at this high levels that we've achieved through the initial Trump administration. It'll start to wane again.
And Rob, that's exactly right. You know, General Flynn just put out a post a couple hours ago where he said 2026 needs to be the year of accountability. And that's exactly right. The president has been very clear, but now it's actually enacting that down into the different departments. You know, have people been held accountable? I mean, it seems a little thin on the accountability side, you know, both on the general officers, the senior JAGs. They did dismiss a few of the JAGs, but we all know there are layers and layers of people below them that fully supported the mandate and the illegal policies, and that just hammered people. Another great example is in the IG. When some of these airmen, you know, and warfighters were being harmed or were being attacked, if you will, were being unfairly treated, at certain points in their defense, what they were advised to do was to file IG complaints. In many of these cases, the IG complaints were just dismissed. Mm-hmm. So the IG, specifically in the Air Force, and I'm sure in the other services, was the IG system was complicit in basically harming the airmen that were kicked out, or that were mistreated, that were slow rolled, etc. And you brought up a good point earlier today. It's not just about court-martialing people, which happened to Lieutenant Bashaw and others, or people that were effectively not allowed to re-enlist, or people that were forced retired. But it's also about how you get ostracized. Let me tell you, Rob, 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I'm on a certain track. I'm working for great 4-stars. I've been very blessed in my career to have great opportunities. I was learning a lot, and they had me on a path. They're giving me the certain training. I'm going to deploy. The second that this investigation happened, I was basically relegated to the leper colony. 100%. I can handle that. We continue to serve. We knew we were going to fight this battle from a very lonely position, and that's okay. Once again, I can handle this, but where is the accountability? Where's the accountability for the same people that were opposing the Marxist investigation against me, defending it 3 years ago, who are now the same people that are advising that they overturn the BCMR win that we achieved after 4 years of proving the fact that there's just something not right inside the Air Force. And we were so happy to have the win, and then so distraught to have it just ripped out from underneath of us.
Yeah. I know you won't mind me saying this, but folks, this man is not stationed inside the contiguous United States right now, and has been fighting this battle long distance. So that's an even bigger sacrifice when you're facing forced retirement in 3 days. Quite frankly, well, we've got some more questions over in the audience. Let's go ahead and take one before we get to the end of the show. Go ahead, Shell.
Secretary of War, is it a direct appeal to even President Trump? If somebody in your situation, sir, can't seem to get them to move the needle, what would be the next logical step? Because we need to get your message out there as much as possible, sir.
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for your support. We're in the short hairs. We've been fighting this every step of the way. We're at the point now with about 2 days left. We are appealing directly to the Commander-in-Chief, because he's the only one that, if he picks up the phone, one of his advisors sees this and gets it to him, we're confident that they, one, can overturn of the board, but number two, they could freeze my retirement, they could extend it. We did put in for an extension, and it's supposed to go to the Secretary of the Air Force, and within about 24 hours, it was returned, and all it said was, denied, you will continue to retire on 31 December. So an extension is what the board recommended until all actions were remedied. The Secretary of War has the authority to overturn this, and the President of the United States has the authority to overturn this. So that's our appeal to the President. We've had really good press. We've had Cross-Politic write articles. We've had Gateway Pundit. We've had Breitbart. Stars and Stripes is actually coming out with a great article, I think, tomorrow, as well as a few other outlets that are putting their articles together at this time. So we're very thankful for the support we've had. Libs of TikTok came up on the net and reposted a short video that I made that's going viral right now. It's actually, I never thought I would be pinned on Libs of TikTok, but I'm currently the #1 story as we speak, and I'm very thankful for the support that they've given me, because they see the injustice. The owner of that platform, she sees the injustice, and she jumped on this in a heartbeat, and I'm so thankful. So I appreciate the support of your audience, Rob, and I welcome any support and amplification they can provide.
All right, absolutely. Well, I've got one more question over there. I'm going to go ahead and take it real quick before I get to my last question, Chris. Go ahead, Shell.
Last year we went down to DC. He just got promoted years ago, I was looking at a program that was very informative, and it was a very, very high-ranking officer in the military, and he basically said, I keep it brief, he basically was saying that not all, but a lot of colonels and a lot of people that are the ranks above a colonel, most of them are globalists. So if that's my concern, my cousin's been in Europe, sister in Ukraine, I had a chance to speak to him. But if that's in fact true, if they're more globalists, are they following globalist policies and don't really care what you guys think, not excluding yourself, Maness, and the general?
Thanks for the question.
Yeah, Rob, if you'd like me to answer that.
Go ahead.
At the end of the day, as you well know, we need leaders that are going to serve our nation by defending our Constitution. We're a rare case in the world. We don't swear allegiance to a king, to a queen, to a government. We swear allegiance to the Constitution of the United States. And if we need to get back to that. We need to teach civics in the military. When I deployed, that's just another thing that really made some of my detractors angry. It was just crazy to think that they thought I was pushing politics when I gave every single airman that arrived at my base a pocket constitution. And I basically explained to them, I asked them the question, how many people have read this? Very few had ever read the Constitution. So we sort of went through it at the introduction of every arrival of cohorts that arrived. And they were very thankful. I got many positive comments later, like, sir, I never read the Constitution. But that is what we swear an allegiance to support and defend both internally and external enemies. And that's what we need, Rob, more people that believe in our historic foundations.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and I'm glad this came full circle because you mentioned that one of your folks came up to you and said, "Hey, every time you question these COVID policies, it's being seen that you're getting more and more political from my perspective, from their perspective, and that is a problem because it's like we're behind the looking glass, to use a colloquial phrase, Chris, because take, for instance, the seditious six, the elected officials that are out there pushing and implying that the current commander-in-chief is giving unlawful orders and really are fomenting potential disobeying of lawful orders. But then there's those of us on this side of the argument that were not elected officials, but saying, look, you're trained to not follow unlawful orders. And the people that are not following this unlawful order have been hammered, completely hammered. And I think the number is 78. 78, the last time I looked at it a few weeks ago, was the number of people that have been reinstated since this. And it ought to at least be half of the 8,500 or so folks that were forced out through discharge. And many, many more of the situations like yours are very, very simple, very clear cut, that they need to be overturned. That's why one of the groups that I'm on the board of advisors for, called STARS, sent a letter to the president asking for blanket pardons for all of the 85 to 100,000 people that have been harmed by this. Well, we got about a minute left. I wanted to give you a chance to tell folks where they can find you and what you need them to do. Give them an action that they can take, and we got to get this ball rolling really fast.
Well, thanks, Rob, and thank you for your time today, and thanks for your audience for listening. So I'm on X at Sage Ideas, so at Sage IDEAS. You can follow me there. I'm putting up all the most recent developments. Amplify that as much as you can. Reach out to your congressmen and senators. Tag our senior leaders, the president, SecWar, on social media, and continue to fight the good fight. This nation is worth defending. This nation is worth saving. And we're a people of faith. We have a long history of faith in God, faith in our nation, and faith in our families. And we need more leaders that are going to take that flame into the future, if you will.
Yeah, well said, sir. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Please enjoy your rest of your holiday with your family. God bless you. We'll be continuing to pitch into this fight and continue to get this word out. Brigadier General Chris Sage, sir.
Thank you.
All right, folks, get out there and take those actions like the general just asked for you to do. Look, things happen fast in this world, and there may just be 2 days left, but it's still time to correct it. And we can get it corrected even after the retirement date. That's the way things work. And that's what we're going to continue to try to do, because this country is worth saving. Action, 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 as our friend Steve Bannon is fond of saying. I'll see you after the new year here on the Rob Maness Show on Worldview 2.